Welcome to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast, your weekly news roundup of hunting, fishing, trapping, and conservation stories from around the Gem State. Hosted by Fish and Game's Public Information Specialist, Connor J. Lease.
And welcome back to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast. This week, we're talking about E-tagging salmon and steelhead, some early season fishing opportunities coming to Southwest Idaho ponds, and a hot off the presses poaching case coming out of Farragut State Park. But first, a deep dive into last year's harvest and what it could mean for this year's harvest. It's that time of year again, boys and girls, as we foam at the mouth, anticipating which hunting units, weekends, and drainages to scope out this fall. Here is a summary of how last fall went, thanks to Hunter Harvest reporting. Let's kick off this year's harvest summary with the one species that didn't see an increase from the previous year, whitetails. Whitetail deer harvest typically hovers around the 22,000 mark, and last year's harvest wasn't too far off from that. Hunters still have room for celebration, as the year's harvest could have looked a lot different, but we'll get to that in a bit. Last year's 19,702 whitetail harvest still sits right in line with the 10-year average, which, despite a handful of EHD outbreaks during the past decade, still continue to flourish. Despite slipping a bit from the 2024 hunter harvest, last fall's harvest has Fish and Game biologists nodding their heads with optimism as we round out the final weeks of winter and approach this year's hunting season. Mule deer, or technically speaking, mule deer hunters, are the biggest winners from the 2025 fall season. Harvest of muleys jumped 2.8% from 2024, or put another way, 691 more animals during this past year's harvest. That's worth noting considering some of the state's population had a rough go of it during the winter of 22 and 23. Fortunately for them, the past few Idaho winters have been some of the mildest in recent years, including this past winter, which, for now, has been Club Med for mule deer. But as Fish and Game biologists point out, mild to non-existent winters can have reverse effects come later in the summer. Finally, on to elk. Elk hunters also had a successful fall, accounting for a 2.4% increase, or 509 animals, from 2024. As we've covered every year in these annual reports, elk don't feel the impact of weather nearly as bad as their long-eared or white-tailed cousins. Last year's harvest landed at 101% of the 10-year average, or 21,249, which makes it about as close to a quote-unquote normal harvest as you can get with fluctuating annual harvests. So let's take a closer look at elk first. There's nothing exactly to write home about if you look at last year's elk harvest. Across the board, harvest totals and success percentages are pretty standard when compared to the previous 9 years. Sure, there might be a 2 to 3% increase or decrease from year to year, but in the grand scheme of things, that's marginal. And remember, these numbers pour in from every corner of the state, not one specific elk zone or hunting unit. Fish and Game wildlife managers point out that based on hunter harvest, aerial surveys, and survival data, elk populations are doing very well, not to mention a couple of real bright spots. Here's Fish and Game's Deer and Elk Coordinator, Toby Bedreau.
Harvest of 6-point bulls is the highest it's been in 5 years. We're also seeing a 14% bump in total harvest since 2023.
Now, not to read the tea leaves and get too far out ahead of this year's coming elk season, but this seems like a good spot to bring up that quote-unquote head-scratcher of a harvest dip in the 2023 season. After all, elk populations were healthy and stable following that previous winter and into summer. That mild winter, which was a godsend following the brutal 2022 and 2023 winter, was incredibly dry. But that summer, however, benefited from ample precipitation, greening up elk summer range and thus keeping them fat and happy at higher than normal elevations. Last year's summer did not play out that way. Currently, as we crawl out of one of the driest, warmest winters experienced in recent decades, only time will tell if we see another similar trend in fall of 2026. Successful elk hunters, believe it or not, go where the elk are. And when pitiful snowpacks and peak summer temperatures start blistering the landscape in June or, even in late spring, those elk tend to go where the resources are. So keep that in mind. We will definitely dive deeper into this year's hunting outlook more as the season approaches and environmental conditions play out. But the reason I bring this up is to keep it in the back of your mind as you begin scouting your usual hunting holes later in June and July. All right, let's look at mule deer for a second. Much like elk, the 2025 mule deer harvest doesn't really bring up any red flags. Last year's harvest was well within the 10-year average, which, if you note the presence of the seemingly astronomical 2016 harvest in the chart on our website, is still hovering right below 25,452 for the 10-year average. Estimated number of mule deer hunters did bump up by nearly 2,500, accounting for the same exact success percentage as last year, 32%. Even general and controlled hunt success mirrored that of the previous year.
Last year, we saw more Idaho hunters returning to hunt mule deer.
The big divot in mule deer harvest came in 2023, which was to be expected. By now, nearly every mule deer article written since that winter has alluded to that hit in population, specifically in regard to eastern Idaho's deer herds, so I won't beat that horse to death. The reason I bring up that year's harvest, though, is to show that muley populations are rebounding, particularly in those units impacted by that brutal winter. As the saying goes, hunters kill elk, winners kill deer. And with the passing now of two utterly feeble winters, mule deer continue to rebuild their herds. But the gravy train only runs when there's ample food and water, which hot, dry summers can negate heading into the months after. With all that said, muley hunters can chalk up last year as a win, with increases in success rates and 4-point harvest since 2022 and 2023. This signals that after losing a significant amount of fawns during that winter, there is a new crop of bucks that are reaching maturity. All right, last but not least, here's how white-tailed deer did last year. Wildlife managers anticipated a slight drop in the 2025 harvest. The culprit? The same offender that reared its head back in 2018 and 2021, EHD. Epizootic hemorrhagic disease is the biggest harvest factor and an unfortunate reality for Idaho's white-tailed deer. EHD occurs periodically in Idaho's Clearwater and Panhandle regions, typically during hot summers and during drought, and sadly, that's likely to continue in the future. Fortunately, most EHD outbreaks affect a relatively small percentage of the deer population, although it can have a larger effect on local herds, but the effect is typically short-lived. Last year's EHD outbreak popped up in late July and August, paving the way for potentially another low harvest year. However, statewide harvest held steady. Estimating the actual number of deer lost during an EHD outbreak is extremely difficult. However, based on the number of reports received at the time, the 2025 outbreak proved to be similar in severity to the 2021 event. Leading up to fall, wildlife managers chose not to alter the 2025 whitetail season. The Clearwater region, where the bulk of the outbreak took place, had strong populations overall, and despite some localized losses, deer numbers across much of the region remained robust and well above concern. Based on experience with past outbreaks in Idaho and neighboring states, recovery typically occurs within 3 to 5 years, depending on habitat conditions and winter survival. While EHD outbreaks can cause sudden and visible losses in localized areas, white-tailed deer populations are well adapted to recover from these events. Fish and Game wildlife managers will continue to monitor white-tailed deer herds, particularly in those two regions as we approach summer. But statewide, whitetails are doing well in much of the state, including 5 points, which are still holding steady over 20%. A solid sign that mature bucks are still making up a good portion of the population. Now, while this is a statewide harvest recap, it is worth mentioning Unit 73A's inaugural muzzleloader and archery-only general season mule deer hunt and how it played out. Following recommendations developed by an advisory committee working group composed of Idaho hunters and Fish and Game wildlife managers, The Idaho Fish and Game Commission adopted new seasons in Unit 73A that changed the any weapon general season to muzzleloader and archery only for the 2025 season. As expected, both hunter participation and success rates in 2025 decreased markedly. Wildlife managers are using GPS-collared mule deer, aerial surveys, and hunter information to closely monitor how this weapon type change to the general season influences the mule deer buck population, as well as the behaviors and experiences of hunters. Wildlife managers estimate that buck populations will be higher heading into this year's hunt. Fish and Game staff in the Southeast region will have more information in the coming weeks regarding the Unit 73A mule deer hunt and change and what it may look like heading into this fall. Last thing I want to mention from this story. Hunters, if you're listening to this, you're the ones who make this kind of harvest data possible. This might shock a few people, but knowing how many deer and elk get harvested by hunters every year depends on, well, the hunters. Your involvement gives wildlife managers and our staff important hunt and harvest information that directly goes into gauging herd health across the state, figuring out where and how much hunting pressure takes place, and ultimately setting seasons and rules for future hunting seasons. This is conservation at its core, folks. Nobody's asking you for GPS coordinates or bullet weight or whatever flavor mountain house you packed. It's literally, did you harvest, yes or no? So hunters, take pride in knowing you're doing your part to ensure game populations remain healthy and resilient, and ensuring each species will still be there to hunt for your kids, the next generations. Now, the moment has already come and gone to fill out hunter reports for last fall, but this is a reminder that better information means better management, which in turn can mean more hunting opportunity because a lack of good data can mean shorter hunting seasons and or fewer tags. I know it still feels like a century between now and the fall of 2026, but take this simple reminder and file it away. Make it a tradition every year. Do whatever you think it will take to remind yourself to fill out your mandatory hunter report next year after next fall's hunt. For an even deeper dive into this story and all the minutia from last year's harvest, including controlled hunt success rates, numbers of hunters per species, and so forth, hit the link in the show notes to read the full 2026 Hunter Harvest Report on our website. Now, moving away from big game for a sec, our regional communication manager, Jen Bruns, has some timely information out right now about a hot new tool for salmon and steelhead anglers. For salmon and steelhead anglers looking to simplify their time out on the water, e-tagging offers an alternative to traditional paper tagging. Available through the Go Outdoors Idaho app, this digital option makes it easy to record salmon and steelhead harvests quickly and efficiently. So, how does it work? Instead of the hassle of carrying and filling out paper tags, anglers can log their harvest directly on their phone. It's quick, convenient, and it fits seamlessly into your fishing routine. E-tagging puts everything you need in the palm of your hand, allowing you to instantly log your catch with just a few taps. Here's regional fisheries biologist Don Whitney.
E-tagging helps us manage fisheries with greater precision. Accurate reporting from anglers is essential to managing these fisheries, and every digitally recorded harvest helps Fish and Game make timely, well-informed management decisions.
Getting started is super quick and painless. Just download the app, purchase and validate your e-tag permit, and then finally sync it before heading out. This part is essential. Anglers with a current paper permit cannot switch to e-tagging for the 2026 season, but will have the option in 2027. E-tagging is a practical option for anglers who want a simpler way to report their harvest while contributing to the long-term health of Idaho's fisheries. For more on this story, hit the link to read Jen Bruns' full press release on our website, or go check out Fish and Game's e-tagging webpage. All right, moving on to where to find rainbows this month if you call Southwest Idaho home. More than 2,000 hatchery rainbow trout are headed to 4 community ponds in the Southwest region in mid-April, creating new early season fishing opportunities for anglers in Council, McCall, Meadows, and Cascade. Brown's Pond, located south of McCall, Fisher Pond in Cascade and Meadow Creek Pond in New Meadows will each receive 600 12-inch hatchery rainbow trout during the week of April 12th through the 18th, while Old McDonald Pond in Council is set to receive 300 fish. These 4 ponds haven't historically seen their first stocking event until around Memorial Day, so the mid-April date provides an additional month of fishing for local anglers. And it's not just a one-time event due to the mild winter either. It's something community pond anglers can count on in the future. Here's Bob Becker, Hatchery Complex Manager for Idaho Fish and Game.
These represent a long-term addition of early season stocking to the McCall region. We're planning on providing this spring fishing opportunity annually in these local community ponds.
That's all I got on that. Check out Brian Pearson's story if you want to learn more. Last up, Fish and Game is seeking information on 2 elk illegally killed in the Panhandle region's Farragut State Park. On April 12th, Fish and Game conservation officers received a report of a dead cow elk and a bull elk calf within the park. The animals were located less than a half mile from the visitor center near State Highway 54. Following an investigation, officers determined both elk had been shot and portions of each animal had been removed. Given the high level of use in that area, it is believed that the elk were killed during the late evening or early morning hours, likely under the cover of darkness. There are currently no open elk seasons, and elk hunting is not allowed within Farragut State Park. These types of crimes are violations of Idaho law and losses of valuable public resources. Elk are iconic big game gems in Idaho, and illegal harvest undermines management efforts that sustain healthy herds. Anyone with information about this incident is encouraged to call the Citizens Against Poaching hotline at 1-800-632-5999. Information can also be reported online. A Citizens Against Poaching monetary reward will be requested for individuals who provide credible, detailed information that significantly helps identify the person or persons involved that leads to any relevant charges. Hit the link down in the show notes if you want to learn more. That's all I got for top stories. Let's hit the rapid fire bulletin. As bears have emerged from winter dens across Idaho, Fish and Game is reminding residents and visitors in bear country to stay bear aware and take simple steps to prevent attracting bears into neighborhoods, campsites, and recreation areas. Quote, when bears learn they can find easy meals around homes or campgrounds, it increases the likelihood of conflicts that can be dangerous for people and harmful to bears, says James Brower, a regional communications manager in the Upper Snake region. Quote, properly storing attractants is the most effective way to keep you safe and to keep bears wild. Senior Conservation Officer Jim Sterling, who serves the Magic Valley region in the Twin Falls, Kimberly, Hanson, and Murtaugh areas, was honored as Idaho's 2025 Shikar Safari Club International Wildlife Officer of the Year. Officer Sterling was recognized for his outstanding service to the community, his fellow employees, and the sportsmen and women of Idaho. His work reflects a strong and ongoing commitment to conservation and resource protection. If you're listening, Jim, a huge congratulations to you, my friend. Mark your calendars, folks. This year's Lake Pend Oreille State of the Lake open house will be on April 22nd at 6 p.m. at the University of Idaho's Sandpoint Organic Agriculture Center. Anglers and community members interested in Lake Pend Oreille's fishery are encouraged to attend to learn more about current conditions, management efforts, and what to expect moving forward. The open house will not include a formal presentation. Instead, fisheries staff will be available to answer any questions and visit one-on-one with attendees. Participants are encouraged to watch the video on our website in advance and come prepared with questions. Idaho Fish and Game Southeast Region will be hosting an upcoming hunter education program open house for current and prospective volunteer instructors. The event will take place on Friday, April 24th at the regional office in Pocatello. This open house is an excellent opportunity for community members interested in becoming certified hunter education instructors to learn more about the program, training process, and the important role instructors play in promoting safe, responsible, and ethical hunting practices. Hit the link if you want to learn more. That's all the news we have for this week. Thanks for putting an ear to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin. If there's something on your mind, or if you got a question related to Fish and Game matters, feel free to drop us a line at podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. Again, that's podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll catch you next week.